Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. This show is about helping you grow as a coach by standing on the shoulders of giants. Each show, you get a different mentor in your ear. The early motivations, the successes, the failures, the tools, the tricks, and the insight into where the industry is going. All of it so you can make your own dent in the world. Remember, success leaves clues. Now, without further ado, on to the show.
What's happening? Welcome to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. We are in season 3, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Brendan and Kevin from Certified Functional Strength Coach. Now that's a mouthful, so we're going to go CFSC for short. But if you're in the nutrition or fitness world, you get a certification at some point, and typically it's from one of the big certifying bodies, and it really isn't all that helpful. Or you go to school, you get an exercise science degree, and you come out of it and you really don't have any practical skills. Kevin and Brendan saw this and they wanted to solve this problem. And at the time they were at MBSC, Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning. And so they were able to leverage that platform to launch CFSC, Certified Functional Strength Coach. And they developed the practical application of it, which is one thing that's definitely different about what they do. But just like building anything, there's ups and downs and twists and turns, and we get into all of it in this episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with Brendan and Kevin of CFSC. Brendan, Kevin, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This is going to be fun. I think this is the first podcast with two other people that weren't married. I mean, maybe you guys you're kind of work partners, but not married.
That's debatable.
We might have been married at this point.
Yeah, 17 years common law.
I like it. So the reason we're having you guys on is a Certified Functional Strength Coach certification that you guys developed. And I don't have a ton of the backstory. I've sent my coaches through it. I think it's great. I've seen the back end of it and it's great. It's something that our industry needs, but like this podcast, we get into the backstory and the origins, and it didn't just pop out of nowhere, and it probably wasn't the easiest thing getting started. But let's start big picture. And Kevin, I want you to tell me if you were pitching CFSC or were explaining to someone that didn't know anything about it today, how do you talk about CFSC?
What I always tell people is that we're focused on providing real practical education for coaches. In the fitness industry, the certification models are largely centered around people reading a book and taking a computerized exam, with that person having no experience actually coaching another person or demoing exercises or teaching anything. And so what we try to deliver are real everyday skills for coaches: how to build a program, how to adjust a program or exercise selection around someone who might have a limitation or an injury, and then how to communicate that effectively to the person in front of you. So real tactical skills, as opposed to understanding definitions in a textbook or memorizing a multiple choice exam. I want you to be able to take the skills we teach you in a course over the weekend and then go take those into the gym immediately to be able to better serve the people that you work with.
Cool. I like it. Brandon, anything to add to that?
I would add, so it's real practical education, but for real people. I always start my CFSC events with our program and our system. The CFSC system is going to cast a really big net, and you're going to catch a lot of people in this net, about 80% of the people out there who will pay for training. We are not going to grab a subset, a 20% group, and that group is Olympic lifters. If you want to master Olympic lifting and hit PRs in Olympic lifts, it's the wrong program. It's the right program to get in shape. It's the right program to get healthy. It is the wrong program to enter a powerlifting meet and win a powerlifting meet. It is the wrong program to enter a CrossFit competition. It is the wrong program for someone who is rehabbing XYZ from the start. Now, we set a really good platform for all of those endeavors, but it's for real people. And again, those are the people who have expensed their health in order to make enough money to pay you for personal training and group training. We're not going to we use the best tool for the job at hand. I think that's the other thing is we don't rely on one tool. We don't rely on just the barbell, just the kettlebell, just the TRX. We rely on what's the best tool to get the result that we want. And that leads to our regression progression system that we have for every single exercise. And that's really the basis of the CFSC, and what makes us probably unique is it's practical education for real people. And then the system itself adjusts for the individual. The other analogy I like to use is the belt system in martial arts. Putting a barbell over your head and barbell snatching to me is a black belt exercise. You have to earn your white, your blue, your brown, your green, all the way up before you put a barbell over your head. And we still have too many systems or too many classes that day one, hey, welcome, put this bar over your head, start barbell snatching. Like, to me, that is a problem. And that is one of the big issues that we still see out there, and why the CFSC has probably been as successful as it's been. I believe we're September will be year 10.
That's awesome.
So we've been around for a while now.
I love that. So we were talking a little bit, Kevin, before you jumped on, but you guys knew each other in college. And so when did CFSC, like, when did the idea, or when was like the spark for the idea? Because sometimes like the spark and when things actually get implemented, there's a time frame there. But Kevin, when did you guys first kind of have this idea about creating the certification?
Well, it's interesting because, like, ever since I've been at MBSC as a coach, people had been asking Mike to put together some sort of certification model. And he would always be very quick to say, yeah, that's something we're not going to do, because he really didn't believe in the certification models that were currently available. And the way we had always trained our staff in-house was through an internship program. It's three months where you're coaching every day, you're doing classroom time every day. It's very intensive in practical learning. And so what we would always, to hire internally, we would just say, I don't care what you have, we're going to teach you how we want you to do it. And then over time, as Brendan was here and the business started to grow, the demand got greater. And, thankfully, Kevin Larrabee, who was part of our founding team originally, gets a lot of credit for the organizational piece of helping us put it together and build a site and deliver it in a way that was still to the standards that we wanted. I remember having a meeting with Brendan and Mike and Larrabee and Bob and saying, like, okay, if we're going to do this, what do we really care about? And it was the practical education piece. People have to come to a course. These are the exercises and things we know that if we're going to hire a trainer, these are the things they need to be able to teach, adjust, and accommodate for in a training session. And that process probably took like a year, really, because I remember us Brendan and I doing these mentorships, right, where we would travel. And this was kind of before CFSC was a thing, where we would go and we'd do these small little mentorship classes that were like 1 or 2 days at different gyms. And we would start to teach our system. And we were like, this is going really well. We were getting feedback and we were finding out where we were making mistakes and tweaking and really developing our education skills, our teaching skills. And then we thought, okay, we can probably really build a business out of this model. And we kind of dialed it in over the course of that year. And Larrabee really gets credit for kind of putting it together into the website and building the manual with us based on the training information that we were delivering. And so it kind of grew organically out of business that we had here. And then a continual demand of people asking us to, hey, can you teach what you teach your interns? Because our intern class becomes a really big launching pad, I think, for a lot of people's careers, and people who were hiring them found like these were really dependable employees. And so how could we kind of bottle that kind of same staff training education that we were doing into a certification model?
One of my biggest takeaways
The biggest takeaways is
The one specific takeaway.
biggest takeaway for me was probably content, showing up more online with more of my personality, more education, growing my personal brand as well as my company's brand.
making sure that you're marketing to the right people, not just trying to be everything to all people.
Is the social media marketing aspect. How do you go about creating content not only for your audience, but also for an audience that you don't have yet?
Is how passionate everybody is and how everybody is willing to help in this industry. They made me realize that I can also be there. I can be in that space. It's not that hard.
Is to reach out to many people I met here and talk to them, because the wealth of knowledge is so fantastic that it's just really exciting to be able to have these contacts to be able to talk to you.
Something that rang in my head as the day went on was letting everyone you know how well you know them.
This event could change the trajectory of our whole business the next 12 months, definitely the next 90 days. So that alone is worth coming.
You have to own the communication with your client. So making sure that you're their go-to reference and building a network.
Is how do you help your clients continue to stay uncomfortable and grow?
So you guys had a bunch of people, probably about 5 different heads working on this thing. Was there a challenge around or was everyone kind of like, hey, this is the way we should do it? Or was there a lot of internal battles of hey, we should include this, or no, that's too much, we don't want to do that? Was it challenging to actually get everyone to agree on the curriculum that we're going to teach? Or because it was kind of an MBSC thing, was it a little bit more straightforward?
I think because it was born out of what we were doing here every day in real life, that it was pretty easy to do, because Brennan and I were taking on the bulk of the actual teaching and curriculum, but it was really what were we coaching every day? And then we would kind of meet, really, Mike, Larrabee, Brennan, and myself, saying hey, do we all agree that this is, the standard and this is the material and the curriculum we want? And it was a pretty easy discussion actually early on to kind of narrow that down, at least from my recollection, unless Brendan has some different memories from those early days.
Well, Kevin Larrabee was always the organizer and did all the tech. So Kevin and myself knew we didn't have to do any of that. Mike wasn't going to do any of that. Essentially, Kevin and I, again, took what we were doing at the mentorships and doing with the interns. And our internship lasts anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks. So we just packaged that into something that was deliverable. To give everyone a little context, the CFSC, before you ever come to the event, there's anywhere between 9, 10, 12, 11 hours of video material. So watching all the exercises, the regressions, progressions, there's 5 lectures. You have to read Coach Boyle's book. There's a manual. So we just took what we were doing already, like Kevin said, every day. And over that 12 to 16 weeks, what do we want an intern to know by the time they leave, and package that into something that was consumable. And then they would come to the live event, which is 8 hours of just doing, demoing, teaching, coaching. So for example, with our interns, we would do an hour or 2 a week of lecture. And then they were required the first 2 weeks to do the actual program that the athletes and the adults were doing and experience that and be coached by us. And then for the rest of their internship, they actually had to hop into groups with other coaches so they could learn from other coaches, but they had to experience it. And as trainers, we are all movers and we all learn better by doing and moving. So that was part of the requirement. So we wanted it to make it, when you come to the one-day event, there's no lectures. There's no sitting down with a notebook. There's no sitting in a chair and listening to me talk for an hour, hour and a half with a clicker. It is, you start, foam roll, stretch, activate. We coach you just as if you were a client or one of our interns, and we do that for 8 hours straight. And then at the end, you're required to do the practical portion, like Kevin mentioned earlier in the beginning. You have to demo, coach, and teach in front of the other people in the group to prove that you have the skills in order to coach somebody. It's not just sitting down at a computer. And I I memorized this stuff from a book. Like I can actually coach a live human being.
So kind of going back to those early days, the first, so you have this, you have the manual, you have the curriculum, you've got the site, you've got everything done. What did the launch look like? I mean, obviously there's a little bit of a platform with MBSC and Mike's kind of online following. And so were you able to launch to kind of eager bodies, or was it a little bit of a struggle to get things rolling right away?
Yeah, that first event was big.
First event was 70 people, I think.
Yeah, and so we got
after
off
that, not so big.
Yeah, Mike's. This was really interesting, actually. So, like, our first local event, we did the first one here, obviously, and we had like 70 people in that level 1 course. And then the challenge became, traveling and teaching courses in other locations. Like, we don't have proof of concept other than this one event at this point. So one, getting testimonials from people who valued it. And then figuring out, hey, how do we set up events at a gym in New York City or a gym in Florida or a gym in California, starting to build that. We were fortunate actually early that one of our earliest events, we went to Europe. I remember we had an outreach from Germany because of Mike's partnerships with Perform Better. And that was another really big one. I think we had almost 70 people at that one as well. And so that started to kind of get the ball rolling and people seeing it, us using things like social media, newsletter for people to see like, oh, there's people that are buying into this concept. But then we did early on, like we were doing much more outreach about, hey, can we come host an event at your facility? Whereas now it's much more, we have people reaching to us. And so we had to do work, I think, early on to, tell people like, hey, we'll trust us. Will you let us come in and do this event at your facility? Whereas now, because we've had, 10 years behind us, we tend to have people outreach to us. But early on, yeah, I mean, the events were small. If I look back, if I go into our roster and look at the early events, there's some single digits in some of those early events. And you don't really see that as much anymore.
Yeah. I remember my second event that I taught by myself was in Seattle, and we actually had 16 people because it was Jesse Ewell's place, who was a MBSC Thrive adopter. So he had us in. Then my next one after that, though, was for 3 people in San Jose, California.
Yeah.
Kevin, I think you did one at Frank's place in Arizona. I don't remember how many people were there.
I think it was maybe 10 people.
We had our early adopters and the Mike Boyle believers, but we had to do some legwork in the beginning to prove the concept, and we had to speak in front of 2, 3, 4 people sometimes, and we didn't cancel events at that time. Now, if it gets to a point where like we don't have enough signups, we might push an event, cancel it, give them the online, or try to get them to come to a different event. And so like we've grown to a point where we can say no now. So for example, I think we got 2 people who wanted to host yesterday, and we already have events in their area booked out until next year. So it's going to be a no, unfortunately. Of course, they can come to the other 2 events we have in the area. But yeah, we've gotten to a point where we no longer have to say yes, we can actually say no. But it took us 10 years to get there.
Honestly, the favorite part of the event?
My favorite part was...
My favorite part of the event has to be the people. Everybody from the presenters to the attendees have such an energy and a passion for what they do.
Seeing my coach Justin Harris speak and also Stan Efferding, that was awesome.
I'm loving the connections, the opportunity to speak with a lot of the other speakers, with the audience. I'm really enjoying the setup of the event because it's really keeping a lot of open doors for you to just speak to everybody.
Seeing how these high-level business owners and people who are where I want to be, who I embody, is seeing how they think, how they operate.
Inspiring, getting inspired by industry leaders, taking things that I can apply immediately in my business.
I think outside of the amazing speakers that you guys had, is that everybody's pretty much like down to...
My favorite part of the event was really just meeting with other professionals, people that are outside of my circle, really great people, and learning kind of who they are and how they can make their clients better and make the industry better.
I really liked what Coach Cav had to say about the environment always wins. I think he used an analogy about the fish aren't sick, the water's dirty. Creating the right environment, whether it's on your team or with specifically working with your clients, creating the right environment is always the key to success.
So, I mean, so early on, it was a lot of outreach. It was a lot of, hey, we'd love to host this at your gym. And they were maybe connected to Boyle. So there was like that trust coming from, but I mean, as far as like marketing goes, was it you guys then like, hey, we got to try and figure out who's within a, driving distance maybe of this place that could be interested in it. So what did the early marketing look like? Like if we have an event in, let's call it, and maybe not even a big city, let's call it like Davenport, Iowa, right? Where it's like, maybe they don't have enough people like there and people got to drive. What did the marketing world look like? So you're like, hey, we got to fill this thing. So Kevin, tell me a little bit about how you guys approached that.
Well, it's interesting because now you realize in 10 years, social media and marketing strategies have changed so much compared to 10 years ago. Like now, like you can target ads, you can target populations in certain regions that you think might be beneficial to your business. But back then it was very much talk to the host and say, hey, in your area, do you know any other gym owners, physical therapists, facilities that we could outreach to? And I remember early on literally looking up in the area I'd say, hey, can you reach out to some people? And if they didn't have contacts necessarily, we would send an email to surrounding gym owners and say, hey, just so you know, we're coming to your area. We're going to host this event. If you're interested in sending, a group of your staff, we can put together like a group discount code. We can tell them about what we do, give them a sample of video from the materials and say, hey, this is kind of what we're teaching. And literally having to just do cold outreach to people, because you're right. In some of these places, like you get, if you're in the middle of the country, sometimes you're like, I don't know what's around, like you said, Davenport, Iowa.
Right.
Whereas something like New York City might be easy, or, you know, Boston area is easy, obviously for us. But in some of these places, like you're just, throwing out, putting the rod in the pond and seeing what comes up.
Ooh, I like that. In the pond. Yeah, we relied very heavily on the host and who they knew, and generally we would only go to places in the beginning where they already had 3 to 4 trainers at their facility who was interested. Now it could be a solo gym owner and we could pull from the outside easily. But in the beginning, we tried to find spots where the host already had 3, 4, 5 coaches who were interested. But it was tough in the beginning. Like Kevin said, the social media was not a marketing hub back then. So it was cold emails, I guess, at that point, and relying very heavily on the host to help us out.
So, I mean, did you guys kind of see this like initial big rise, right? Because you've got kind of the Mike Boyle posse, like everyone there. So like, hey, let's do this. Like you saw the big one right away. And then was there just kind of valley after that we had to kind of get out of? Or was it more of like we came back to maybe a normal standard and was able to kind of hold that norm for a period of time?
I'd say we had a little, to go from an event of 70 to initial, it gives you a lot of hope though. Like, hey, we can get 70 people to do this. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that we can do events with 20, 30 people all over the place. But to go from 70 down to, 5, 6, and then have that last for probably about a year or two. But as Kevin said, we had these big influxes with Perform Better specifically. So Chris Poirier was kind enough to let us host events every Thursday before the summits the first few years. And we'd get 20, 30 people every time because those people were already coming for education. They were interested. They've all heard Mike Boyle speak at the Perform Better Summits for the last 20 years. So again, like you said, there's trust, there's buy-in, they know about it. So those were like really hopeful to keep our spirits up while we did all these events with 3, 4, 5 people. I guess it was just important for us to know that it is possible to get these large groups. It's just we need to do the work to get there and get our name out there. So there was a probably pretty big lull. I actually want to look up now that you're asking. We have all that information to see what the attendance rate was of those first 20 events that we did in the first 2 years.
Well, I would say one thing, big credit to Perform Better, because they got us a lot of exposure. We talk about marketing. That was a partnership early on that really helped us launch the business because, Perform Better was packed, especially then. And so we would go into pre-conference and you look at all the pictures from our Perform Better events and it's 30, 40, 50 people at some of these on a Thursday who were already going there for education. So that every time you get an event like that, that's 50 people who leave and tell their friends or coworkers, hey, this was a really good investment of my money and I learned a lot. And so I think those first few years, that really helped us climb from a notoriety standpoint. People started to know who we were in a really big way. And I would say, in addition, when you kind of talk about a peak and a valley, you realize early on, it was really Brendan, myself, and Kevin Larrabee teaching all of the events. Mm-hmm. And so I think getting out of that kind of a valley after our initial launch, a lot of it came down to us training staff members to be able to teach. Because three guys can only teach so many courses. Right. And then us being like, okay, as the demand went up, again, Perform Better helping us, we were able to start to, okay, we can bring on another coach and train them. And we have a natural feeder system at the gym of coaches who kind of know the system to begin with, and us kind of getting them up to speed on how we run an event. Once we were able to do that, we were able to take on more. And at the same time, our brand recognition had started to grow. And so we were able to kind of bring ourselves back up to kind of what we're seeing now, whereas, we're having a pretty steady enrollment month to month.
I mean, what do you guys, for an event now, what do you feel like is a solid event? We're like, hey, that was good.
I like 20 people.
12 is my favorite.
Brendan likes 12.
I like 12.
I mean, so
wait. Are we talking one coach? One coach 20?
Yeah. We always say like there's a Brendan event. A Brendan event is like 12 to 14 people. But like
this is right.
But like in reality, like one coach and you can take 20 people at once. That allows us to, one, from a revenue standpoint, make it, this is financially worth it, but then also still keep it small enough that you can provide personal attention. So when I taught in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, I had 18 people and I was able to have FaceTime with everyone regularly throughout the day. I was able to field all the questions. We were able to finish in a timely fashion. After you get more than that, then you need to start to assign more coaches, which obviously for us from a cost to revenue standpoint increases. So that around that is perfect. I think it's a great experience for the attendee, and it's also doable for the instructor.
My favorite's 12 because I don't have to work as hard when there's 20. So, hey, I actually have the numbers up right now. So our first event ever was September 6th, 2014. We had 63 people. So our next event was in November. That was the one, Kevin, you did in Arizona. You had 6 people.
Oh, Jesus.
Then we did one at Boyles. We did one at Boyles again. So the first event at Boyles, we had 65. The next event we had at Boyles, we only had 9. Then I went to Mountain View, California. I had 4. January, I went to Alan Cosgrove's place, Results Fitness. I had 7. We did one in February at Boyles. We had 26. Kevin, you went to Dublin, Ireland. You had 19. We did Perform Better in Rhode Island. We had 28. New York, we had 22. New York, we had 10. Winnipeg, Kevin, you went to Winnipeg. Yes. You actually had 17 in Winnipeg. Chicago, we had 18. Chicago, we had 6. San Francisco, we had 13. San Francisco, we had 4. So there's peaks and valleys in the beginning there. That was the first year and a half.
Yeah, and you just actually brought something up that's another good point when you talk about marketing is when you named off the places we went to, leveraging relationships that you already have. And so you talk about Alan Cosgrove, someone who gives you brand recognition, someone who people trust. Mm-hmm. You reach out to people who you already have relationships with, whose a recommendation on their part strengthens your brand. So like Alan, someone that Mike obviously has a long relationship and Brendan and I have a long relationship with. Doing that there with him, people see that and say, oh, Alan trusts with his people there. The Winnipeg event was a Thrive location. through MBSC Thrive. I remember reaching out to Mike in Eugene up there and saying, "Hey, I would love to come up to Winnipeg, of all places, in the middle. I believe it was in the middle of winter, Brendan. If you look at the date,
it was in the middle of winter.
Yeah, and going up there, and so leveraging those relationships that you have when they say like your network is your net worth, right? Those were really key to us kind of getting going early on to get the events filled and to get people to want to be interested in coming.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for pulling that up, Brendan. That gives a little bit of context. It was it was kind of like this. Yeah, you get a big one and then you have a little one and a big one. Because honestly, like a 4-person event, you're losing money on that event with like flight and hotel costs and food costs and paying someone. Like that's for you guys now. What's like your minimum at this point of like, hey, we need X amount of people in order to make this make sense financially to fly someone here?
I mean, 10, if you have 10 bodies in there and everyone's
10 to
paying
12,
10 to 12, you can make money. The coach can make money. They're happy. So that's kind of where we set the bottom line now for enrollments.
Cool. I like it. The partnership with Perform Better, was that like a reach out that you guys were like, hey, this would be an awesome addition to, the Perform Better circuit? Or was Chris kind of, because him and Boyle had a good enough relationship? Like, how did that partnership come to be?
Yeah. Just a Mike Boyle relationship with Chris. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't happen without that 25-year relationship that Mike's built with Chris. Like Kevin said, I mean, we highly leveraged Mike's relationships. I mean, Mike was our number one marketing tool at that time. It was all the relationships Mike had made and forged. I mean, at that point, Kevin and I had been there for 5. I had been there 4.5 years. Kevin had been there for 6. So we had met all these people, but we hadn't forged the relationships so like Chris knew us and what we're about. And obviously Mike trusts us with running his program and everything, but yeah, we had to leverage Mike as our main marketing tool and our main network in the beginning, because who the hell are Kevin and Brendan and what the hell is CFSC? Everybody knew Mike Boyle and MBSC in the gym, but yeah, we leveraged Mike a lot. And Mike just said to Chris, he's like, hey, can we try this out for the summits this year? Just try it out. Like, can we have Thursdays? And Chris said, sure. I mean, he's done enough business with Mike to know that Mike wasn't going to put out a bad product.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
One of the things I love most about Coach Catalyst.
There are lots of things I love about Coach Catalyst.
And the reason why I love Coach Catalyst is that
the accountability off the back of that
is simplicity.
The support is amazing.
It allows me to give so much of me to my clients.
It's the drip feeding of content.
I can schedule lessons for my clients in advance.
Game changer for freeing up time.
It gives me my time back.
It's so simple and so easy.
Hi, I'm Kane, the founder of Coach Catalyst, the #1 accountability and communication software on the market today. We help coaches just like you keep their clients accountable and scale their business beyond what they've ever been able to do before. So if that sounds like something you want, let's take a look at how we can help. So Coach Catalyst was built on the 4 C's of coaching. Those are content, communication, community, and consistency. So for content, you need to go beyond just workouts and deliver the whole experience for the client so they get the results they deserve. For communication, you need to own your communication. If you don't own the communication, you don't own the client. So make sure you stop texting clients and use a centralized platform. For communities, get off of Facebook groups and take ownership over your social group with Coach Catalyst communities. And for consistency, the foundation of all results for clients, we took the best-selling book Atomic Habits and built all these fundamentals right within our app that's going to guarantee to get your clients the best results possible. If you want to start using the 4 C's with your clients, content, connection, community, and consistency, make sure you run over to Coach Catalyst and start a free trial today.
And I mean, this may be getting a little bit too in the weeds, but was Chris just like, hey, we'll do it for you? Or was it like, hey, percentage of revenue that's generated? Like, how was that partnership structured?
We just had to pay for a little bit of time for that space for the rental, because the way it worked was they had to rent out that space on Thursday anyways to load in all the equipment for the summits.
Got it.
And so they were already doing like pre-event kind of stuff with, I knew Gray and Lee were doing some FMS stuff that day as well, typically. And so essentially Chris said, listen, if you can run it in this time frame. And I remember also I was being like, guys, we can't go out longer and we can't be there early because the event centers are really tight on that. And us being like, we have to run it between, 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. And we would make it work. And yeah, Chris was very generous to us and us being able to do that, because without them, renting out that whole place, we probably wouldn't have had the opportunity, obviously, to be in a place with all those people looking for education.
And I mean, you're probably using Perform Better kettlebells and Perform Better sandbags and all that kind of stuff. So there's a marketing incentive for him as well.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, they definitely didn't make money off of it.
Right.
So it was just Chris being a good guy and that relationship that Mike had built with him over those years. So yeah, we are very appreciative of that, because without that, like Kevin said, we wouldn't have been able to afford renting an entire.
Right.
I don't even want to know what it would have actually cost us to rent out a room in a convention center, because it wouldn't have covered our expenses.
So
even with 35, 40 people.
So here's just a hypothetical question. I know this isn't like part of the journey, but I think it's a worthy kind of thought experiment. So if you guys were to do this, but you didn't have the leverage of MBSC, how might you have done it differently, or how might you have launched it without that as a leverage point? I know it's kind of hard because that was like a big piece of it going, but I mean, for someone that might be listening and like, hey, maybe I don't have that contact, or maybe I don't have that, how might you be thinking about it differently?
I think it would necessitate some sort of like loss leader type course, where there was some sort of mini free course that we gave out to get people a taste, so to speak, because I think that we had the benefit of people kind of already having an idea of our system and what we were doing at MBSC. So there was already like, hey, I like what they're doing already, and now they're selling a certification. It's an easier sell. If we weren't coming from this background, getting our name out there through whatever avenues, whether it's social media, newsletters, and then trying to be like, hey, here's this free mini course that kind of gives you an idea of our philosophy and our belief system. That would probably be at least in this day and age, a way to get people to learn about what we're all about. Because I think because of Mike, the cachet he had and the reputation he had, people already knew what they were getting into. Whereas if you're coming from the outside of that, it's a much harder thing to do. And you probably have to give something away in that process, I think, to get people to be interested.
I mean, yeah, what Kevin said, the loss leader, to build trust, to show people that, hey, like I know what I'm talking about here. If you don't have any of that trust or clout in the industry, and however you want to build that, whether that's going around to gyms for free and just presenting, or social media, free articles, free newsletters, free podcast, like free, give it all away and then upsell later. I think that, yeah. And then also, like, we were profitable at the end of year 2 because of the runway we had. I think you got to set your expectations. If you're starting from scratch and you don't have the 40 years that Mike Boyle has built, you got to almost give yourself a 5-year runway. I wouldn't expect to be profitable for probably 5 years. We were profitable in 2 just because we hitched our wagon to somebody else. But also at the end of the day, when you do that, you're sharing the profits.
Right.
So your ceiling is limited when you have 5 people who are participating. If you're by yourself, it's a longer runway, but you reap more rewards in the end. But I do think the loss leader, an educational loss leader that builds trust, you got to do it. And it comes down to hard work. You got to put your face in front of people, however you do that, and you got to do it for free. You make the money later. Right. You got to take the long-term approach. You can't look at it short term. You're going to lose in the short term. You're going to have to win later.
I'm curious on why did it take 2 years? Because in my head, and tell me where I'm not seeing or what information I'm missing, right? Because ultimately, in a way, it's an informational product, right? So there's a lot of upfront work to build this thing, build the website, but once that's built, it's built, and there's a level of cost to that, right? And you guys are doing it a little bit different, where you're putting someone in person, which would mean flying someone, paying for them to be there, for that time, food, meals, all of that kind of stuff, which can start to add up. But what were a lot of those costs in that first year that didn't allow you to kind of break even or get into the black?
I just think that we did, like, as you mentioned, with smaller events, we did a number of events that weren't necessarily profitable, knowing that we were going to have to probably do that in that first year to get in front of people. Honestly, work out the tweaks in the system, because I remember us kind of like going through me like, okay, this is something we should change as far as how we run an event or how we put the curriculum together. And so that year we kind of gave ourselves a runway to do that. And I don't think we were particularly deep into the red. I just don't think we were very much into the black either. And so then from there, after that first year, we're like, okay, this is the curriculum that really works. This is the policies as far as, the amount of minimum enrollments we need, the costs, how we're going to manage expenses for things like travel and whatever online things that we were paying for at the time. And then really kind of dialing it in over that first year to really get things off the ground successfully.
Yeah, it's the unknown that was costly. Like, we didn't know what we needed, what needed to change. We didn't know how many people we could expect. We didn't know a lot of things. Like, we needed to learn a lot in order to get, like Kevin said, we weren't like $250,000 in the red. We just weren't in the black either. We were figuring things out, and it took us a little while.
So for you guys, I mean, with 4 or 5 people involved with something, I mean, what did that look like from like an equity standpoint at the beginning? Was it because you really didn't know what was going to happen to this thing? It could be no one wants it, and we're all kind of sitting here, or it blows up into this massive thing. Like, was it just you guys are in a room and like, hey, we'll split it evenly, or like, hey, you have X amount, or here's some straws, like let's pull it out, and whatever percentages on it is what you get? Like, how did you guys figure that out? Because that's a lot of bodies and a lot of minds in the same room.
This is really actually a funny story. So, I mean, we were very fortunate. Like, Brendan and I put up no capital to start this company at all.
Okay.
And so Bob and Mike, essentially, they've been very good to the people that work here, in that if you have an idea that they're behind and they believe can be successful, we'll typically, as an incubator, be like, hey, we're going to front some capital and we're going to give you a small piece of equity to begin with. And you can have equity in this business, you'll get paid. And then from there, as we grow it, we can start to expand the equity that you have. And that's essentially what we did with them. And so Mike and Bob essentially fronted it, took the majority of the equity early on, especially. And then as the company grew, I mean, we've had people leave. Kevin Larrabee's gone, and like we've started to, equity has started to grow on our end as the business has grown, as we really do. Brendan and I essentially manage the business on the day to day. Mike has been always been our top guy, obviously our marketing piece, but he has been great in deferring most of the responsibility to Brendan and I in running this business. And as we start to, prove those things, we've kind of grown our share of that business. And so, we were fortunate in that because at that time, I didn't have any capital to give.
Right.
So now we're in a different place as we want to expand our ownership and whatnot. So it's been very good. We've been very fortunate from that standpoint.
And was that like written out in advance, or was it more kind of like a handshake in like, we understand who Bob and Mike are, and like we've been around them enough that like we see this is kind of the tentative path where we're going to go, and or was it like written down in numbers, once we hit X amount, here's what shares are going to cost to buy back or anything like that?
Oh, we had a whole agreement. Yeah, we have a whole, we had a whole equity agreement written out, and which for us, I mean, that was the first time. I mean, Brendan and I started the massage business between the two of us, but that was the only time we really had anything laid in front of us. That was substantial. And so, and then we were fortunate as it grew in that, we had opportunities when Kevin Larrabee had left for us to take on the equity that he was given. And, as this business has grown and Mike and Bob are getting older, the progression will kind of, continue in that direction.
Do you?
With them, it always starts with handshakes and then
go ahead, Brendan.
Ends with a contract. Well, let's just say it starts with handshakes, and then they cover their asses by having you sign. We had a contract, but again, they took all the risk. They get more of the reward. They paid for all the lawyer fees, because you got to have a lawyer write up those contracts and all that. So Kevin and I just had to sign the dotted line and agree to that handshake. And it's, like Kevin said, it's been morphing ever since. And we didn't know what the hell we were doing at that point. And we got a little bit, I like to think, more knowledge now that we could read it and know what was going on. But they took a chance on us, and they took all the risk, and they've greatly benefited. We all have greatly benefited from that.
Well, I mean, there's just less gray area, right? Like handshakes agreements are great in the moment because we're all excited and this thing is new and like it's going to be awesome and we're going to the moon. It's kind of like, all right, what happens when like things go south, when we start finding out like, all right, who's really in it and who's not in it? And when you have stuff in writing, and this is probably came back to bite Bob and Mike in the ass earlier in their careers, that like, we've done handshake stuff that's just went way south, and it's better to like spend the money up front, get everything organized, what this is going to look like if it's a massive success, and how do we divvy this stuff out. And for you guys, probably they saw two young, eager, motivated dudes that want to go do something, and like, hey, how can we support these guys into creating something that's going to be really helpful for the entire industry?
Yeah, and I think also these businesses like CFSC being one of them, but like the online business that Steve runs, things like that, it also creates avenues for our coaches to make more revenue.
Right.
As you know, as a business owner, you have a coach who, they're doing 30 sessions a week, right? So they're doing a lot of training, and then they think, okay, now what? Mm-hmm. How do I create more revenue stream? And that's something that, I mean, Mike was doing on his own prior. Like he developed strengthcoach.com and his speaking and his books and his coaching all into, now I can make a pretty sustainable living. Mm-hmm. The hard part as a gym owner, I think, is, how do I keep people longer and limit turnover? Because that's the biggest battle. And so what I think Mike and Bob saw was that if there's good people working for you, if you can create opportunities to keep them there, mm-hmm. That help them make more revenue, it helps everybody. It helps the business, the brick and mortar business be more sustainable. It helps the coaches be happier. And then we can build something else outside of that. And so it kind of naturally became that. And they have a kind of a history of doing that. I mean, Kevin Larrabee had built Body by Bill Online, which became MBSC TV, as well as MBSC Thrive, in that same kind of vein. Having those kind of almost entrepreneurial opportunities within this building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the things I learned working there was that you don't ask for more money, you ask for more opportunity. And with more opportunity comes more money, as long as you can back it up. And that's, I mean, for me, that's served me very well in my career, not just at MBSC, but more opportunity equals more money, not more money.
Right.
Not asking for more money, and there's more opportunity.
Right. I mean, this is a natural challenge of like the gym industry, right? Like there isn't this corporate ladder, this corporate hierarchy where you can just keep moving up, right? Until you're, the president or whatever. It's like we can't just keep paying a coach more, because then we'd have to like keep charging our clients more in order to like, you know, like make that work from just a numbers standpoint. And so like, I mean, they've probably been doing it long enough where like, how do we provide more opportunities? Like you said, Brendan, I think that's a great way to like, all right, how can I serve at a higher level? How can I create something new based on my knowledge? And, you know, they had the platform to allow you guys to at least get maybe a little bit of a head start because of that kind of the notoriety, the know, like, and trust factor that MBSC already had. So no, I think that's awesome, and probably very forward thinking of Mike and Bob to you know, be doing that with guys. So, I mean, when we look at CFSC over the last 10 years, like everything, like education evolves, right? And so like what you guys were doing day one versus what you're doing now, what would you say let's start with the similarities. What are the things that are part of the CFSC that haven't changed, that are like just like foundational pillars? Brandon, you kick us off.
I think the number one thing is our coach to attendee ratio is, like Kevin mentioned, we don't really go any more than 20. In the sweet spot for me is 12, but if you're asking Kevin, it's 20, but anywhere between 12 and 20. But I mean, I've been to courses where it's one instructor and 180 people. And they're double the price that we are. I won't name what those courses are, but for me, like that's the number one constant thing is the coach to attendee ratio. Is we keep it small enough that everyone gets their questions answered, everyone gets attention, everyone gets coached, everyone gets to participate, everybody takes the practical exam. I mean, we could do it where we have one coach to 60 people. And I think what a lot of those other courses have found is you get all your acorns collected early, but there's no acorns left for later. So that's why we're on year 10. And a lot of these courses fizzle out in 3 to 5 years because they collected all their acorns and just sold out as much. And then it's on to the next place or the next course or the next location. But I like to think that we're going to be around for a long time. At least that's the plan. So I think the coach to attendee ratio is one of our probably unique qualifiers that nobody else does. Everybody tries to get as many people as they possibly can. And that's probably the most constant thing that we've done over the last 10 years is we didn't sell out to try to get more people and more money, because we could make more money with bigger events, but we've always kept it at less than 20.
Yeah. And I'm going to go a different direction in that, like thinking about the changing of the education and what we deliver, I would say our principles are the same. They haven't really changed. How we look at building a program, we always talk about the recipe, hasn't really changed, but what the ingredients inside the recipe have changed over time. And what we try to do is the content that we teach, we want it to be as reflective as what we're currently doing with our clients as that we think is best practice here as possible. And so whereas we might still believe, hey, foam roll, stretch, active warm-up, power, strength training, conditioning, like that formula is the same, but maybe the exercise selection, like we've made a lot of updates to the content as far as like, here's something that we're doing now instead because we think this is better. You know, how we explain our thought process has definitely evolved. So if you realize, Brendan and I updated a bunch of lectures recently. And like Brendan and I were 10 years ago, I was, 26 years old doing that first lecture. I'm a much different person than I am now. So my ability to communicate my ideas has changed. And so I think that it's continually improved. I think when you look at many of the certification models, you're learning what they taught in the 90s still in a lot of the larger certification models. Whereas for us, it's like, hey, because we're a smaller company, I think it allows us a little bit of flexibility. And they're like, hey, let's refilm this video this week. Let's refilm this week. Let's make an update to the manual. Because how we've found that we're doing it differently in the gym every day. Because we're trying to keep it as connected to what we think is best practice as possible, which we have an advantage in that. I think that we're tied to a facility that's working every day. And we're a smaller company that kind of allows us to pivot a little bit more quickly.
So going to the flip side of that, then, Brendan, what has changed? What have you maybe seen the biggest difference between version 1 CFSC versus 10-year-old CFSC?
When I think about that first event that we taught, it was bad. Like, I mean, it was good for what we didn't know. It was good for then, but now I look back at it and be like, wow, that was a bad event. I can't believe people paid us for that. Thank God they did, because it let us learn to get better. But we were going into it blind. We knew what it was like to teach the interns. We knew what it was like to teach a week-long mentorship, but we didn't know what it was like to teach all of that in 8 hours and how to test people for that. So I don't know if it's so much has completely flipped, or I think just the different iterations over the years. We've just, the word, and I hope I'm going to say this correctly, because somebody said it to me. He was a professor at Oregon State. I believe it's pedagogy. Pedagogy is the ability to teach us something like in a systematic way. And when we first taught the event, we didn't have any of that. We were just kind of shooting our shot in the dark and hoping that it went well. But we've got it down to almost a science now, where there's 11 coaches who can produce almost the same exact product anywhere in the world at any time. I think that's the big thing, is that we didn't just like rest on like, hey, we're pretty good. We got 70 people who showed up to this thing. Let's just keep doing that. We've continually gotten better and better from a teaching perspective, so that the attendee can consume it easier. And that includes our pre-material. So like Kevin said, updating videos, adding things to clarify things a little bit more based off of questions we got asked in the course. Or, there are some things where me specifically, has added something or gone off course a little bit, and I've got to be reeled in by my business partners over here. Hey, Brendan, you can't tell people that, or you can't do that, or hey, we don't do that anymore, so stop. But yeah, no, that's. I think we've just streamlined that process, but improved it a lot. I think that's the biggest change for me.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the staff development thing, and Brendan kind of nailed it, is like, I have, all these coaches who teach for us based out of the gym here, and like us being able to teach a system that's consistent. And part of that is me, like this last event we did here, I didn't coach a single minute, but I sat and I watched everybody, and I wrote down notes and provided feedback as far as standardization goes, and allowing them to have personality, like their own personality and teaching style within the reins of what we want taught. Like, I don't want everyone to be me. I don't want everyone to be Brendan, but to be able to teach in their own way within the curriculum that we want, and making sure that that's consistent, because it's amazing. We did it early on. I won't say who. I remember someone being like, hey, like I was in this group, and my husband was in your group, and they got different information. And I remember that being a light bulb moment in that first year, being like, okay, guys, we need to be better about exact curriculum delivery. And from there on, making that a priority about our staff training and our education, so that the experience was consistent for everyone who attended a course.
Hey there, coaches. Are you ready to take your coaching game to the next level? Get ready for an unforgettable experience at the Super Coach Summit.
Join us at Reston, Virginia on August 24th and 25th.
Where top-tier coaches from the best in the industry will converge to share insights, strategies, and inspiration. And here's the best part. Lock in your spot with our super early bird tickets. Don't miss out on this limited time offer to save big and secure your seat among coaching's elite. Connect, learn, and grow alongside the best in the industry. Get your super early bird tickets now. Visit virtual.supercoachsummit.com for more information and to secure your spot today.
Yeah, I mean, I think if version 1 of the business is really good, you launched way too late, right? Like version 1 of most businesses should be like, oh, there's a lot to be, yeah, we have something here, but there's a lot to be improved upon. Yeah, I love it. So Here's one interesting thing with you guys with CFSC. So you have level 1, you have level 2, and I think you have an online version. You don't have like 50 certifications. You don't have like the CFSC of like kettlebells and CFSC of like lever bells and CFSC of like TRX. And so when you look at certified companies that certify people, right, it is typically a one-time transaction, right? There's very little recurring revenue in that world. And so how companies typically try to create a bigger pie, right, is just having more and more and more and more courses that their people can go through. You guys don't do that, and you're 10 years in. So like, I would hypothesize that like it's not the route you're going to go. And so I'd be curious on the thought process around that, because it probably has been a conversation amongst you guys of like, hey, why don't we do this thing? Because it like can definitely generate more revenue for the business.
This has been really an intentional thing for us. And I think that part of our business is that we double down on trying to teach entry-level coaching education. And I think that there's so many certification companies or education bodies that want to serve everybody. And they want to have a special certification for every piece of equipment or every little niche. And it takes away sometimes from their ability to provide that one great product. I think about that idea of being a perennial seller. A really good book by Ryan Holiday, if you haven't read it. And talking about like these products that stand, or services that stand the test of time. And for us, like, we want to be the choice for people who, hey, I just got out of school, or hey, I'm a business owner and I want everyone to look and build systems and train the same way. I want to be that service and that education model. And because people always ask, oh, when's there going to be a CFSC level 3? Right? Is the question I get all the time. And I always say, like, I'm not going to just continue to make levels to make levels.
Right.
We have some online recertification or continuing ed courses, as we term them, that are more niche, but they're secondary to our main services, which are CFSC level 1 and level 2, which will focus on Gen Pop and athletic development. Because in my mind, like Brendan touched on it earlier, like, we're not going to focus on a tool. We're not going to focus on a niche. We're going to focus on what do we think 80% of the athletic population and the Gen Pop people need. And then we're going to continue to refine that based on the current thinking and practice. And for us, that model has been consistent, because then our brand on those two things grows stronger and those services grow better, rather than us spreading ourselves to be like, I need to find a new course. I need to create a new course all the time, where that there's a lot of work that goes into doing that. It would take away from our ability to provide what we want to provide.
Yeah. The basics never go away. The basics will never not be a thing. And I talked about it earlier. There's flavor of the week courses that, where are they now? Like, they last 2 to 3 years. They make their splash and they're gone, which we need those courses. But again, I want to be around for the next 45 years. So therefore we are going to like Kevin said, double down on the basics, because the basics aren't sexy, but they're always going to be cool and they'll always make us money and we'll always be around for that reason. So we're going to make the basics really, really good. And I mean, really, level 1, level 2, like that's our mothership. And then everything else trickles down from that. And everything else is just like a subtitle or it's extra. But if you have 1 and 2, I mean, you've got the tools to pay the bills. And as long as you got those, everything else is extra.
Right. And honestly, like, I'm thinking about this from like a business perspective, right? And so because you're going after a newer coach, right? The unfortunate part about our industry, right, is there's a fair amount of turnover in our industry. There's a lot of people coming in, but there's not a lot of people that are retiring in this industry, right? And so like the pool gets smaller and smaller every year that you're probably looking at in the industry. And so if you guys were like, hey, we want to go after the advanced coach, right? That pool is probably like really small. Right. And then like now they've done your stuff and it's kind of like, all right, cool. Like we have to wait for a few other people to get there. And so maybe that's a nice like niche kind of side thing. But as far as building an actual real business that generates revenue around it, you need a big enough pool of people that continually is like refreshed. And so, I mean, when you're going after people that are training general pop, like that's the vast majority of people, right? People that actually train athletes, there's not that many positions of just training athletes, right? There's just not as many of them, right? And so I think that's a really smart, intelligent decision from your guys' standpoint, being able to focus on that, because now you can ride that for as long as you want to ride it, right? And so when did level 2? Because you went with level 1. When did level 2 come out?
It was probably 2 or 3 years after that, correct, Brendan? After the launch. I think we were probably 2016 to 2017 when we started that. And that was really based on, like we said, when we did level 1, we wanted to focus on general population. That was intentional, in that we thought that like everyone, whether that they were going to do athletic development, needed to learn that anyways. Because a lot of the principles carry over: the overall program design, the basic progression regression ideas, the general coaching skills will carry over to the athletic development piece. But we also, and part of it was like, you can only fit so much in one course.
Right.
We wanted that level 1 to be a 1-day practical. And so level 2, we were like, okay, if we want to expand this and then divide it into another course, there's plenty from an athletic development standpoint to fill another course curriculum. And so they kind of naturally go hand in hand, progressively, one to the next.
The way I describe it to people when they ask about what level 2 is the first level 1 is the first 8 weeks of training for everybody, whether you're 11 years old, you're a professional athlete, or you're 75. Everybody starts at level 1 for the first 8 weeks. At week 9, that's when we really would dive down into our athletic development model. Week 7, week 9, we would dive down into our athletic development model, if that's, who you got: youth athletes, professional athletes, college athletes. And then the adults continue, or the Gen Pop continues on the level 1 track. So level 1 is the platform for everything and everyone. So therefore, let's start there. And we had to build a big enough pool of level 1 in order to get enough people who wanted to take level 2.
Right.
And we still only probably teach 6 level 2s a year, maybe 8 level 2s.
We do more in Europe than we do here. It's interesting. The athletic development demand actually in Europe is much higher than it is in the United States. And I think that is possibly because fitness culture is much more of a thing in the United States than it is in Europe. Europe, it's sporting culture. Everyone still participates in sports. Everyone still trains athletes, and they move like athletes. Here, you have a lot of fitness type mindset. So they don't necessarily have a sporting background. Things like Olympic lifting, sprinting, medicine balls are more foreign to them. So in the United States, to be honest. And so our average consumer here tends to be very level 1 focused, whereas like I'll go in 2 weeks and teach a sold out level 2 in Europe with like 40 something people. And so you see different patterns in different parts of the world for sure. But yeah, I mean, the amount of people who pass on to level 2 in the United States is probably a quarter to 30% of the people who continually take level 1 each year. And that's kind of what we see in our market here.
So kind of switching gears a little bit into kind of inside of the business. You guys have been doing this for 10 years, like both in it since the beginning, right? That's a long relationship for most anything, right? And 10 years, especially in a business relationship, and not necessarily having anything that has caused it to splinter to a point of like someone leaving, right? Which my guess is like it hasn't been all like, rosy the entire time. But what would you, Brendan, I'll start with you. Like how do you think you and Kevin are able to work so closely together on this thing for this long?
We were friends first. So it's not like we started the business and then became friends. We were friends 7 years before and kind of almost like grew up together. So I think that was helpful. Obviously, we're not friendly we're friendly with Mike and Bob, but we were not friends with Mike and Bob, and we weren't really friends with Kevin Larrabee. So I think when you have a really good idea and everybody knows their role and everybody is passionate about seeing it be successful, I mean, you can roll with anybody. And Kevin Larrabee left on his own accord. He just wanted to go do other things. No harm, no foul. Like be moved on. So it wasn't like a falling out or anything. But yeah, I think we all had this. It was a good idea. The risk was low. We all knew our roles. I think that was important. Is like we knew our role. Kevin Larrabee knew his. Mike and Bob knew theirs, and and everybody knew where they stood. But yeah, like for Kevin and I on this call, we were friends first, I think, and Mike and Bob were friends first before they went into business. So I think that's important for us. And I mean, I know that can not always go well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes business will get in a way and break those relationships up, but we just haven't allowed that to happen. And I think, yeah, we all have similar values too. Right. So that's been helpful.
Yeah. I think, having a strong mutual respect for everyone else that was in there, and then understanding where everyone's best role was. I think it was kind of clear early on that, Brendan and I were going to be the people who did the course delivery, the content generation, the curriculum management, where Kevin Larrabee was preferentially wanted to be in the technical and organizational end of the business, where Brendan and I really had no part in being in. And so we had already siloed ourselves, and Mike essentially being the figurehead and the marketing piece, and Bob runs our financial end of things. Mm-hmm. Those were all easily siloed. We didn't have people wanting to take on each other's roles. And so it allowed us to feel like we were making the biggest impact we could on the business, and us feeling like we could all respect each other in the roles that we had. And I think that has continued now, where Brendan and I are still doing what we're doing, but having staff underneath us, and we're educating them and bringing them along, has allowed us to continue to have this relationship where, again, we're friends, and we continually work together to build the business and continue to try to move it forward. And we've been fortunate in that, that we're able to silo it in a way where it's productive for everybody.
As a gym owner, Coach Catalyst is the key to having low turnover. For several years, I struggled and spent 10 to 20 hours a week communicating with clients via phone calls, Facebook Messenger, email, and text messages. I had tried everything to make my life more efficient. I was at my wit's end. And then I found Coach Catalyst. Since starting the software, I have found a life again, and my clients are thanking me for being so involved in their fitness life. I've cut my daily commitment to interacting with over 300 clients to under 15 minutes a day, and have streamlined my 6-week challenges. I couldn't recommend it more. I just don't know if I would even be here today if it wasn't for Coach Catalyst. If you don't have an account already, you're missing out and not helping the people you could be.
Is there anything you guys do consciously to help keep that strong? Or is it just you kind of, because you were friends first, you kind of understand each other well enough to know where kind of each other is at on any given basis? Because you're not seeing each other all the time now too, because you're on opposite sides of the country, right? And so is there anything you guys have included into kind of the business organization structure where you're making sure, hey, we're checking in, we're seing where guys are at?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking pretty regularly.
I think we're yeah.
We're call each other or email each other pretty regularly, both socially and business related. So I think we're constantly kind of have an idea of where we're at. And, because we have a close relationship, I think that if we weren't as friendly as we were with each other, we would probably have to have more of a regular, hey, we got to meet today. We got to meet. We don't need that as much because our communication is pretty constant all the time. And even though also what's interesting is, Brendan moved pretty early. What year did you move?
I moved 30 days after the first event.
Yeah. So we started it, and then Brendan moved shortly thereafter that. And so we've kind of had this since the beginning where, we made this relationship work from a distance. We had our long distance relationship, so to speak, from the very beginning.
We still do.
Yeah.
I think a big thing too is none of us micromanages anything about what the other is doing. It's a question like, hey, what do you think of this? Or can you do this? Or what do you think of this? But there is no micromanaging from any of us, from Mike, from Bob, from myself, from Kevin, from when Larrabee was there, or from any of our employees or other coaches who teach. There's zero micromanaging. There's full trust there until you break that trust, and that's when it has to have a discussion. But no, there's zero micromanaging, and like I can rely on, I know that whatever Kevin's doing is good for the company and probably worth doing, and that he's going to do his share. And if not, I'll just ask like, hey, what's up? Do you need help with that, or what's going on? I think the other thing is, so for this past weekend, I facilitated a event in Las Vegas for Coach Boyle to come speak at a big chiropractic seminar. And we're trying to get CFSC linked to their university and also get into the clinic side of the world and bring CFSC to PTs, chiros, acu, doctors. And Mike and I really just hung out, had a couple beers. We had lunch together. Like, we didn't need, I think breaking bread might be one of the best things you can possibly do for your business. Like, I mean, the reason why we're so friendly with Mike and Bob is because we can break bread with them. I tell people, I've said this in Brazil with Kevin, like one of the reasons why I think CFSC is so successful is that we break bread with people after the course or before the course. I mean, not a lot of instructors will actually even talk to the attendees or go out with the attendees. Right. I think that's honestly one of the biggest reasons why we're so successful, and why Mike is so successful is you can go grab a beer with Mike and you can just hang out with him and you don't have to talk about CFSC. We talked about his son Marky and his lacrosse experience so far in college. He asked me about my kids. Like, we just, we talked about old times. Right. Like, we didn't talk about CFSC at all, but we know that CFSC is getting better. It's going to be more successful. We're still running that ship. So yeah, I think nobody micromanages anybody. Everybody knows their role or their place. And then we can all break bread. Like, and again, maybe that's just because we're a smaller company. I understand like a big corporate company probably doesn't have those benefits, but that's why I think we're so successful and why we haven't had that turnover or that fallout.
Right. So, I mean, kind of looking into the next 5 years, what's the future for CFSC? Like, how do you feel like you're going to win in this space?
I think Brendan started to touch on it. I think where we see the biggest need is in the formal education process, whether that be universities for exercise science students, whether that be in physical therapy school, whether that be in chiropractic college. They're not getting education. Even Brendan and I in an exercise science program that was pretty good by, university standards. Right. I mean, Brendan and I had years of more experience from them just from going in and coaching on our own in a place like MBSC. Right. And so being able to create alignments and partnerships with universities and formal education bodies where you can help them provide real practical education in a university-based setting, I think is really important, because if not, that student gets out of school, and we see it all the time, they come to an internship and they have no idea about how to actually do their job.
Right.
And so if we can, one thing we really want to target is penetrating that formal education model and working with those educational bodies in a way that serves them and serves us and ultimately helps their students.
But, when they do come out, they could probably tell you every step of the Krebs cycle, which is
exactly. I think about that every day when I'm at work.
Yeah. I need to explain that to Susie as she's on the air bike trying to breathe. No, I love it. This is awesome. And I love what you guys are doing. And so keep it up. I mean, this is really what it needs. And I have an exercise science degree as well. And I didn't learn anything as far as how to coach people actually in school. And I was lucky to be going through school when guys like Cressy and Boyle and people were starting to put stuff on the internet. Right. And I could learn from those guys through blogs and all of that, and just kind of put in the necessary work in school and to pass the test. But I think if you guys can penetrate that, I think that would be hugely beneficial for kids coming out of school. So I want to finish this thing up, and we kind of have a little tradition at the end of the podcast to just have a couple random out of the blue questions that are not related whatsoever to what we've talked about. So we'll just kind of go in order here. I'll kind of call on someone first. So Brendan, you're first. Burrito, taco, or quesadilla?
Burrito. You get more stuff inside of it.
Yep. All right, Kevin, same question.
Burrito, pure volume, like more volume. I want a big
volume. Yeah.
Everyone I talk to, they only choose burrito if they're kind of a volume person, where it's like, hey man, I'm going to Chipotle and I want to get all of my $8.49, and so I'm getting it wrapped twice, please.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yep, double wrap.
I like that. All right, the second one. If you and Kevin, we'll start with you. If you could live in any cartoon world, what cartoon world would you live in for a week?
Cartoon world? Probably, like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner.
Okay.
Because they don't die, apparently. You get an anvil dropped on you.
Right.
But it seems exciting, and like if Brendan and I were in that world together, we would constantly abuse each other, but there would be no potential downside because we have to have another episode. So I like that world.
I like it. Brendan, same question.
I'm going Willy Wonka. Okay. I just want to eat candy all day for 7 straight days.
I like it. Brendan, you're the first person that said Willy Wonka that I can recall. So very original. I like that one.
Good.
I like that one. All right, last one. A little more serious note, or not, depending on how you want to take it. But if you could break bread, Brendan, let's go with you, with any person, past or present, who would you like to sit down and have a conversation with?
John Wooden, hands down.
Are you?
I've read everything he could possibly write. I just want to sit there and just ask him questions, talk shop. He ate at the same breakfast diner every single day for 50 years. I just want to sit with him at that breakfast diner and ask him a bunch of questions.
Are you a basketball guy?
Not at all.
Okay.
I couldn't tell. I mean, I know Michael Jordan. That's about it.
Okay, cool.
I'm a coaching guy.
Yeah, cool. I like it. Kevin, same thing.
Yeah, you knew. Did you know Trevor was a basketball guy? You're trying to hit his sweet spot with that answer.
No, I did not, but now I do.
Well, I've been doing a lot of. I'm really into history. I've been doing a lot of Civil War reading, so I think Abraham Lincoln would be a great, from a leadership conversation, would be very, very interesting. As a guy who was in a very turmoil type time in our country, so that would be a really, I think, interesting conversation to have.
Good.
Would Teddy Roosevelt be second?
Teddy Roosevelt would also be up there. He's one of my favorites. Yeah, absolutely.
He would be my second after John Wooden.
He wouldn't have a conversation with. You'd have to go big game hunting, or something with Teddy Roosevelt. True. I think too.
Yeah, or on the Amazon River.
Yes, the River of Doubt. That would be good. That would be. I might die, but it would be good.
I love it.
It'd be a good conversation.
I love it, fellas. Kevin, if people want to find out a little bit more about CFSC and start digging into what you guys are doing, where can they find you guys?
Yeah, all of our courses are hosted at cfsc.inspire360.com. And so you can see both one of our online courses or wherever we're traveling in the world from week to week to hold our courses. We're very likely going to be in a region near you at some point in 2024. That would be the best place to find our info. And on Instagram, if you want to get some free information, we post pretty much daily at Certified FSC. And that's where we share our events there as well. So.
Cool. And just for clarification, if a coach is going to do it, right, they do the at-home stuff first, right? And then they show up to the event. Is that the correct structure?
Correct. It prepares them. We
suggest.
Yeah. It gives them the outline and the framework and our philosophy prior to heading the event. So they go there and kind of have the mindset of what they're going to get into prior to coming. And we find when people do that, they're much more successful in the process.
Is there a time frame that hey, 30 days out, do it? Or is there a time frame that you've seen work really well for coaches as far as purchasing, doing the at-home stuff, and then showing up to the event?
Yeah, I'd say a minimum of 30 days. You can do it in less, but you're really going to cram it. And some people like to do that, but 30 days is plenty of time to get in and practice and watch everything, read everything.
Right. It probably keeps it fresh enough now when you're showing up live, like you have some recollection of stuff you just studied. Cool. Brendan, anything else that you want to add as far as where people can kind of learn a little bit more about you guys?
Movement as medicine is the other one. If anybody wants to really, because that's the massage business or a movement therapy business that Kevin and I operate together. If you want to learn a little bit more specifically from the two of us, movement as medicine would be the place to do that. Personally, it's Brendan Rearick at gmail.com or brendanrearick.com. Don't find me on social media. I will not participate or follow you or answer any of your questions. I haven't been on in over a year, and I haven't been on over a year on any social media. So my first and last name at gmail.com or .com if you want to look for me personally.
There we go. I like it. Wonderful. I like it. Cool, guys. Well, I appreciate you coming on and telling the story and sharing some stories, and appreciate you guys for what you're doing.
Anytime. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Trevor.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. If you are a coach looking to do more for your clients than just workouts, give Coach Catalyst a test drive. Try it for 14 days. Jump on call with your personal strategy coach, Ashley, and see how easy technology can be, all for free. Tell them Trevor sent you. Until next time, keep changing lives.